Well, folks, I'm going to get started because I don't want to keep you here too long. And I'm kicking back and being a little bit more informal than normal because I kind of want to make that point, which is that we're all, at some fundamental level, human beings. We come together in a dialogue in the process. And that process never ends. There's no one particular bright marker that is the beginning or the end of the democratic process. And it is part of my charter responsibilities to provide periodic updates on the fiscal condition of the town as we approach various key milestones in the year, whether we're preparing for the capital improvement planning process or considering sales in the industrial park or approaching FTR. There's a fundamental responsibility in my mind for government is to provide people with information, not spin. So I'm going to make it very clear from the beginning that if it is your hope or thought that I asked for this presentation to be public meeting or open to the public because I was going to take some sort of position on any of the questions that are going to be on the ballot, you'll be disappointed. That is not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to do is make a couple of points, and we'll start off with one before I get into the slides. Because for all of us who work for you the taxpayers of the town, we've got a couple of things that we'd like to make clear, and one of those is public service is honorable so long as it involves both the public and service. When you consider how you're going to govern your town, you do not sit on the opposite side of a negotiating table and negotiate with your government. If that's your frame of mind, you've already lost. The purpose of democracy is that you, the people, decide amongst yourselves what course of action you want to take at every major decision point, and those of us who work for you implement the decisions that you make. And that is the perspective that we take every single day as your administration and your public servants. I thought, though, as I was listening to some of the debate, that it may be timely to remind people of the fiscal condition of the town, some of our experience as a financial entity, and how all those puzzle pieces fit together. It's quite likely, if not possible, it's quite possible, if not even likely, I'll rephrase that no matter what your perspective, you'll hear me say something tonight that supports your point of view, because frankly, the truth is almost always in the middle of all those points of view. I make a regular practice of doing analysis on the side to try to support decision making across the entire town by doing fact-based, data-based, classic analysis of the financial condition of the municipal corporation, so that we all have a common basis for understanding what the policy tools are that might actually be available. And the last time I did this was October 5th, 2015. I had 4 slides in about a 20-slide presentation regarding the industrial park. And those first 4 slides went over the composition of the town's revenues. So where does the town generate the resources needed to support its services? And of course, we all walked away from that knowing what the answer was, primarily from real estate and personal property taxes at about 65%. And then the next largest amount of revenues was coming from state aid to schools, state aid to education. And then all the other things we do during the year to collect revenue from various sources made up the rest of the difference. The sources of property taxes overwhelmingly residential. Across the value grouping, more than 65% of homes in Tiverton are $300,000 or less. So when you do that curve, you put everybody's home value on a curve, the curve goes like this, or like this, depending on whether I got my right from my left. But there's a tendency sometime in the marketing consulting world, we used to say the average customer is no one. Nobody has 2.3 kids and 1.3 dogs. So that average description doesn't really capture the flavor. You have to look at the entire base. And what you learn when you look at the entire residential real estate tax base in the town of Tiverton is that it's heavily weighted towards working class and middle class homes. And a lot of your value may be populated at the top with some of the most expensive properties, but there are not a large number of properties that contribute that value. And lastly, back in October, I talked about what is the town's capacity for absorbing additional long-term debt obligations, defined not only as the bonds that the town takes out, but what the town may owe in pension, other than pension, post-employment benefits, OPEB, long-term accruals of leave time. And when I did that math, those of you who remember that talk in October, we found that the town's statutory debt limit and the town's total long-term debt obligations were starting to get very close to one another. And you'll see the impact of that as I go through tonight's document, where I just want to go through some of the facts about, because assertions have been made about, is the tax base growing fast enough to keep up with with government's request for resources? I also want to talk about the impact of the portfolio, the long-term debt portfolio has on the municipal budget. What our service level expectations are as a community, how the town is delivering against them, and then I just want to conclude with the fact that there is a plan. There is always a plan to save money and raise non-tax revenues, always. So what I did is I took, just to make this point, what is the gross value of the town? So from every year's certified tax levy, you get a value on the top line, which is the tax assessor says the grand total of all the real estate in the town is X dollars. And if you plot that on a graph, you'll find it grows to be well over 1.9 billion. Well, I was trying to get 3 lines on the same chart. The tax rate, which is never more than $20 a thousand. The levy, which is going to be in the 30s of millions, tens of millions. And then the value of the town, which is on a scale of $1 billion or $2 billion. So you can't do that, because $1 billion is a big number. So you just convert it all to an index. And you say in year 1, the value of the index is 100. And then you normalize all 3 of those variables, and you say, well, how do they move? Do they move together? And look what happens. Over the entire last nearly 20 years of the town, this was the last time we did a 10-year revaluation, and then we went to the 3-year system. So you can see every 3 years, the tax assessor went and reappraised everybody's property and then came up with a new net value, total value for the town, gross value. The red line is the net tax levy. So that's the levy that was levied against real estate. So the comparison is simple. At the end of 20 years, how does the growth in the value of the town compare to the growth in the levy of the town? They're moving together. They're just about the same. One is not outstripping the other. There's a very important part of municipal government is stability, long-term stability and predictability. Whether you're thinking about it as a business climate or predicting the impact on the value of people's property from taxes, the more stable you can be over a longer period of time, the better off you will be. So what happens with the tax rate? Since the tax rate is a calculation of how much of the levy is going to be accounted or assigned to each dollar of value, it does exactly what we'd expect it to. The tax rate is a mirror image of the value of the town. As the value goes up, the tax rate goes down. So as municipal officials, we always warn you, please don't overly focus on the tax rate. It may mean a lot to you and your one property, but for the whole town, it's measuring the impact of the value. As the value goes up, the rate goes down. This chart shows you the municipal budget, the town budget, broken into three pieces. The operating budget, which is the goods and services that the town buys. Municipal capital, which is those things we buy all at once in 1 year, or anything that we buy on installment for a short term. And then debt service. In the municipal side of the budget, when the school borrows, the town side pays the bills on those notes. So all the principal and all the interest on all the long-term borrowing of the town is paid out of the municipal budget. The municipal budget has gone up steadily over the last 10 years. But I also call out your attention to how the mix changes considerably over those 10 years. And you can see, without being overly perceptive, just when you might have gone out to bond. Because that green portion on this slide keeps growing. So more and more of the municipal operating budget every single year is going to pay debt. It's not going to hire new employees or to buy stuff. It's going to debt.
Now, is that all bonds, not just school bonds?
All your general obligation, but right now they're almost all school. There's one municipal bond on there. It's the so-called TIF bond for the sewer interceptor in the north end, in Bay Street. So if you want to make it into words, the municipal side of the budget has grown significantly, about 59% over the last 10 years. About 32% of that, though, is our operating expenditures. So about half of the increase in the municipal budget over the last 10 years has been from absorbing more and more debt. I did a little correction for inflation to try to make a point. Over time, the dollar's devalued. We all know that. How much did you pay for a candy bar when you were a kid? Don't date yourself. I remember 25 cents, maybe 15. Three Musketeers was cheaper for a while. So about 10 years ago, what you bought with $1 would cost you $1.15 today. I just throw a little note in there, is government's a little bit different. We don't buy what you buy in your household. You pay for your housing, you buy groceries, you buy things, furniture. The town buys services, mostly personal services from our employees, and we provide those employees with benefits. Anybody want to take a wild guess at what the rate of inflation is in the healthcare sector?
15%, 20%.
Well, it's not 30.
13.
It depends when you're starting and your ending point. It was a trick question. Over a long period of time, it's 8%. But more recently, it's been somewhat higher than that. So when the town, think about this, the town's budget is $39 million, and we spend $2 million on health insurance benefits for our employees. And that piece of it is growing more rapidly than the rest of the economy. So we have to try to absorb that each and every year. But if taxing and spending are kind of where you would expect them to be over a long period of time, what is actually happening to the municipal budget? Why is it growing? And I've already answered the question, but I think this chart, I like this chart because it's simple. If you just compare these 2 years, 10 years apart, more and more and more of the municipal budget is going to service debt for things that you already own and use. Spaghetti charts. I used to love these as a consultant because this is why we made the big bucks, I guess. I don't know if it was harder to draw them or to explain them. But if you take my starting point, it's municipal capital. Because the barely constrained secret is that that's where the coin of the realm is. Because if we have three things that happen if we don't take care of capital. If I don't fix it and I just let it go, I wear it out. Then I do without. Whatever service I was providing with that piece of equipment that doesn't work anymore, I don't provide anymore. Or I just keep trying to fix the same old thing. I don't replace it, I'm telling everybody it's cheaper, let's just keep fixing it. Let's just keep fixing it. And what we don't keep track of is, how many man hours do we spend at the DPW garage? How many hours of service do we lose when that piece of equipment isn't working? And then how much is it simply costing for parts and labor? So we are actually hiding an increase in operating costs when we don't take care of our municipal capital. And then we can just kick the can down the road. And then at some point, the thing is so broken, we have to buy one anyway. And we either pay what we would have, or we pay more, but we never pay less than we would have. The day we realized the thing wasn't going to work anymore was the day we should have done something about it. So if we wait too long, and this is more about buildings than it is about equipment, the roof is leaking. Shall I fix the roof, or shall I go up there with a bucket of whatever I can get at Job Lot? You know, the gooey stuff, and I slather it on, and I tell everybody who's inside getting wet, don't worry about it, it's fixed. And 5 or 6 years later, that water has creeped to some other part of the roof. Now it's really damaged. And the substrate needs to be replaced. You know where I'm going. It just gets more and more expensive. Some of that neglect will trickle down to this. You'll eventually have to replace roofs and buildings that you could have taken care of at the outset. Whether you finance it with principal and interest, or you pay the same now, more or later, or you increase operating costs, it's all coming here. It's all coming to the municipal operating budget, because that's where it gets financed. And then there's the unspeakable. I put that up there because none of us likes to talk about it, because we have to acknowledge that there are very large expenses looming in the future that we will have to try to accommodate with that same constrained municipal budget that's getting hit with everything else, all the interest, all the things we've been neglecting. So I just call it mission impossible. How many times can you squeeze a water balloon before it pops? So if you have all of these increasing demands, if the pressure inside the balloon is pushing out and everything else is pushing in, something at some point is simply going to break. That font didn't come through. And that brings me to my next point. Like I said, I'm not going to advocate too much. I think I've described the situation to you. The numbers speak for themselves.
Matt,
John.
Can you back up one slide so I can ask you a question? Your municipal capital starting point over there. Are there cases where if we fix it when we find it, we know it's not going to work next year, can we avoid that going into long-term debt? Or is it going to be long-term debt anyway, but lesser long-term debt?
I can answer that question. I'm going to a little bit later on.
Okay.
To give you a couple of potential solutions.
Okay.
But I want to dwell on this point for a little while. Somebody recently said, and it made a huge impression on me, every single person in the town of Tiverton, regardless of their perspective on the issues, loves the town and wants the town to succeed. And so if you take that common ground, which is passion for your community and the desire to see it prosper, ask yourself how you could take that energy to arrive at solutions for the long term for your community. Rather than already jumping to the conclusions, how do you take that passion for your community? And I'm going to make a suggestion. You start with thinking about how the community has made all those unspoken decisions. Call it a social contract. We all have these unspoken contracts with the people in our lives. I do with my wife. We've never had an explicit conversation ever about this. She hates to cook. She hates to go grocery shopping. So we never actually said who was going to do what, but guess who does it all? She's at the point now where she's pressing the buttons on the oven, it doesn't even work right. Nobody holds it against each other. We just have this understanding that somebody's going to step up and do the job. Whether you realize it or not, you interact with your community the same way. Over that long 20-year period of time, when taxes and tax base were growing at the same rate, you were funding a roughly the same level of service. And you've come to take that for granted, but you shouldn't. You should think about what it means to have the services you have today with the men and women who work for you, and their attempts to make the most cost-effective solutions to provide you with the services you need and want. And then when you really break it all down, you start to think about it, it's a laundry list. I want education K through 12 that is neither exceptional nor below average. If you had decided you wanted nothing but exceptional education, you would have made those investments over the last 20 years. Like most communities, opting for public education as a major source of investment, you've made a decision about where you want to be. Now, you're always trying to improve, but what you define as acceptable, you have funded. And it's the same thing for all the other major services. Combined fire and rescue with adequate coverage for all areas of the town. It's been a part of Tiverton to have a fire station reasonably close to everybody. So that's the list. It's too small for you to read. Timely issuance of building permits and completion of inspections. Fair, timely, accurate tax assessment and collection. Easy and inexpensive record retrieval at Town Hall. Library services free for all patrons, adequate hours of operation. Public recreation resources that are safe and attractive. So a social contract is a pooling of financial resources into the temporary custody of an organization that the people who provide the resources actually control. And the idea is, we're going to provide services to you that the private sector won't or can't at the price that the government can. And as all of these intangible things become part of the social contract, the professional level knowledge of the field in question, the physical skills necessary to carry out various protocols and tasks, knowledge of the town's geography, including underground facilities, the small back roads, the problem areas. I used to live in a back road in Cumberland when I was a kid. The North Cumberland Fire District was probably 4 miles away from my home. My father had a heart attack. And I called, and they drove by. And they drove by again. And they drove by again. Because they couldn't find pole 35 to save their lives. So if I finally had to go out, it's there! Right? I was panicked because I think I was 13 years old at the time. Those people who work for you, who know where you are, that's a valuable thing. Awareness of the town's history, and the role certain longtime actors played in key decisions in connection to the aspirations of the residents of the town. All of those things are available to you from that core group of people who provide services. So what is the service level that everyone in town has come to enjoy with the social contract as it exists today, May 18th, 2016? Let's start with the fire department. Of your 28 full-time line firefighters, 12 are paramedics, and 15 of the other 16 are certified EMT cardiac. A paramedic gets 10 times more training than an EMT basic. And there's an ALS, an Advanced Life Support Certified Vehicle, staged at all 3 Tiverton fire stations. 2 rescues, 1 ALS engine. What does that translate into actual operational statistics? The fire department ran 3,133 times last year. 65% of those runs were medical. Since all the staff are cross-trained, the average response time for the fire department was 5 minutes. So maybe you live in a part of town where it's going to be more like 8 minutes, or 1 minute or 2 minutes. But the average is 5. And it's the configuration of the department as it exists today that makes that service level delivery possible. So the conclusion is simple. The services are heavily utilized. There's a significant value. Think of the cost effectiveness Because you go through the mental exercise and you say, could we be better off if we separated the two services and either privatized one or did something different with the other? And study after study will tend to show the exact same conclusion. The most cost-effective configuration in the fire service is to have cross-trained paramedics who are also firefighters. They respond to virtually anything that they can be called to, and when they're on scene, they can play both roles. Police. 25 of your 29 uniformed officers have a college degree. 10 of the 25 who have a degree already have a master's. New officers serve an 18-month probationary period. They spend 12 months in the beginning of their career at the Municipal Police Academy. And the ongoing training that just never stops in the professional police force. I should probably have you tell us, James, but pistol, shotgun, all the awareness issues you go through, whether it's domestic violence awareness, dealing with people who have significant mental difficulties. We all know the things that can happen when somebody is unstable. All the physical training, tactical training, all the things that go into being a police officer. TPD responded to 16,632 calls. More than half of them responded to in less than a minute. 2,500 traffic citations, 264 accident investigations where the damage was greater than $1,000. The last of the big three is DPW, where we have actually pretty thin staff. Again, going back to qualifications. There may have been a day, I'm not aware of it, I've been here only for a couple of years. There may have been a day when any Tom, Dick, and Harry could go, maybe there was no personnel aboard at the time, you didn't have that protection, and you just hired somebody who knew somebody to run around in a dump truck. That is not how Tiverton runs today. All of your DPW workers have a CDL. Whether you think it's hard to get or not, they maintain it, they keep it. It's in good standing at all times. And if they're going to get behind the wheel and sit in the chair in a piece of equipment, they have a hoisting license. So more than half the guys have both of these credentials. The part that really sticks out to me is of the 10 men who work at DPW, they have a combined total of 156 years of experience working for your town. So they know where everything is. And it's not something that's easily replaced. And it's not something that should be devalued. We've got two guys who are represented by a different union. We all know them. We all love them. Manny and Phil, who handle all of our maintenance on all of our plant. 7 town buildings, 2 major parks, so Town Farm and Boulder Marsh, and the 2 beaches. They clean the bathrooms, they pick up all the trash, they do all the minor repairs, all the maintenance, and they stay on top of the whole thing year-round. 2 guys. So we have over 90 miles of road. There's 9 of the Teamsters work on the roads. The other guy is the mechanic. There's 2 guys work at the landfill. Last year they landfilled over 11,000 cubic yards of landfill space. That's about 4,400 tons. A little aside, a couple of years ago, because he had the history and knew what he was doing, one of your DPW workers at the landfill, Kim Litchfield, figured out that the town wasn't making very good use of the landfill space, that there was a whole block of space that could still be utilized under the law because he was paying attention to what he was doing. Folks, he saved you $2 million because the landfill's still open today, still operating, because he got you 3-4 years worth of space because he knew what to do. He knew where to find it, he knew how to save it for you. The mechanic at the DPW barn handles all of the repairs other than the police department gas-powered engines. He uses all the diesel stuff. So all of our fire apparatus, when it breaks down, and on any given day you'll see 2 rescues at the moment, 2 rescues and 1 engine over there. God bless you, John.
Thank you, sir. And all the help I can get.
So the point is, it's not being sent out to a specialist. It's not being sent out to the manufacturer. It's being fixed in-house by a guy who's on the payroll already at straight time. Before I get to this slide, why did I just show you those last three? To put an exclamation point on simple fact. It really doesn't matter at all. I'm going to speak for everybody, even though I don't even know everybody agrees with me, but I see a lot of our employees in this room. Take whatever perspective you would like to take on the financial issues of the town and the policy issues of the town. But please, after you look at those statistics, nobody is a parasite. Nobody is your enemy. We don't come to work every day trying to find a way to take advantage of you. If we find somebody like that, we get rid of them. Because it's not acceptable. But the level of service that you've enjoyed because your public servants believe in public service to you. And that is your social contract. You will notice if any of these service levels changes. You will. At some point, or your family will notice. I'm not saying it's good or bad or indifferent. But if we're unable to continue to deliver those service levels, you've taken it for granted for a long time, you'll notice the difference. This is actually my last slide, so I don't want to torture anybody's eardrums for too long. There's a lot of words on the page, and they all boil down to one simple fact. We never, ever, ever stop looking for ways to save the taxpayers' money or to find a source of revenue that doesn't involve you. So neither a tax nor a fee on you. And so where is the plan? What are those options? First of all, we talked about health insurance. Fact, over the last 2 years, the town's health insurance rates have gone up 22%. 22%. We got 3 things that we can do. We're already done this, it's called go to market. So we get a broker who says, I've got this client, the town of Tiverton, and they have this certain health care plan. Can you get us a better deal? Blue Cross, United, our existing relationship with the trust. Can we reconfigure this plan to save money? We've gotten a couple of the answers back already. If we converted this town from a mutually insured member of the interlocal trust to a fully insured premium-based client of Blue Cross Blue Shield, you think you spend a lot on insurance. Now, it was 40% higher. So if we join the fully insured pool and we bear all the risk of the marketplace, it is not a solution for the town. My only point here is we've explored it. We understand it now, so we're going to rule it out and move on to the next option, which would be, what would it be to self-insure? Self-insure means we pay money into an account every year, and we hope to God our employees and all of our beneficiaries don't have claims that exceed the amount of money we've saved in that account. Or then we're going to need backup insurance or have to go to the taxpayer for more funds. I spent 4 years working for the city of Woonsocket, and during that time we were almost bankrupt as a community and self-insured. We had one bad year where we had 2 or 3 young children, difficult situations, but we blew through our health insurance budget in the first 3 months of the year and started robbing Peter to pay Paul to pay for the thing. And that was a pretty big city with a fairly large pool by Rhode Island standards. For the town of Tiverton, no way. Being self-insured is the formula for disaster. And every single broker, we've had 2 different brokers tell us, whether you go with United or Blue Cross, being a self-insured entity is a very bad solution for the community. So we're left with the second bullet point up that says bargain. Bargain means we're going to sit down with the 2 unions we're negotiating with right now and try to figure out a different way to do this. A different health care plan, maybe a co-share, some other way to break up the cost for the town. It's really the third bullet that interests me the most. We currently have a health savings account plan, so the town has an HSA, health savings account, that makes up the deductible portion of each employee's coverage. With that cost category and then beyond, we need to try to control costs with programs that are demonstrated to work. So in one case, a pharmaceutical price control program. It sits on top of the insurance. It's invisible to the beneficiary, but it's administering the actual usage and cost structure of the pharma benefit inside the health insurance plan. The other is, it's called, a lot of the physician groups are getting smart. They figured out that they can actually get a higher rate of compensation and still cost the client less than the insurance claim if they get paid directly for the exact same service, the exact same physician. And it's rolling out, and the brokers are going to try to get us involved in it because that's a great way to do things. The doctor makes more money, it costs less money for the town. It's just the bureaucrats in the big glass building down city in Providence that won't get it. The second major inflation area that puts pressure on the town's budget is energy, and almost all of that, when I say that, I mean electricity. We're fortunate that we participate in a buying group for electrical generation, and we pay significantly less than the standard residential customer does for electricity because we're in this buying group. But the price is still going up. So when the contract rolled over this last year, we went from 6.7 cents to 9.4 cents kilowatt hour. Now 6 cents was artificially low. 9 cents is still low, but it's still, that was a 30% increase, 50% increase. So our biggest account is our streetlights. Some well over 1,000 streetlights in town. The program, and people have heard me talk about this for a long time, and believe me, we're actually joining a formal complaint with the PUC this week because we've been working on this so long and Grid has been dragging its feet. But the notion is, right now, every single streetlight is an appliance. It's hung onto that pole. It's not all one unit. The streetlight is a separate appliance. And cities and towns around Rhode Island are buying the appliance because National Grid is whacking us for $27 a year for every single one of those things as a maintenance charge. If you buy it yourself and you enter into a contract, it's $7 a year. So there's low-hanging fruit when you know where to investigate how things are structured in the world around you. The second step is to say, well, the old sodium lights are inefficient. LED lights are more expensive as a fixture, but over a long period of time, because they last a lot longer, they save you so much money they pay for themselves 3-4 times over before they burn out. So we can save the town significant funds on the energy side. Asset management plans, we're moving towards this. Our first step this year was to identify all of the deficiencies in the town's assets that we could. What's wrong at Town Hall? Look behind the walls, look under the floors, try to figure out what's going on in every single building, and just come up with a list of things that need to be done. Then we started, about halfway into the year, picking things off. So Manny and Phil were making all those minor repairs. They got out there with the caulk gun, they got out there with the paint, and started taking care of things before they started to deteriorate at all. We actually will be much more formal going forward. All of our major assets need to have an asset management plan. Capital, going back to your question, John. If we have to go out and buy something that's expensive, is there any way to avoid having it hit us? We've been talking about this, the treasurer and I, brought it up to the town council and the budget committee, and I don't think anybody disagreed with the basic concept. The town holds balances in its passbook based upon the flow of taxpayers' payments into the town that could be used for passbook lending against our own cash flow. You buy things cash, you don't pay the interest, and you pay yourself back with your own cash flow. You're still paying the bill. But I'm trying to be simple. I think it's pretty clear, right? Or you save enough money to not have to use that passbook lending approach and just simply buy things with cash. You'd be better off doing that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Denise. This year's recurring capital expenditures, we paid $56,000 in interest. $56,000 in interest in 1 year, just on things that, and you know what kills me is the useful life on some of this equipment is 5 years. The note on the equipment, 5 years. So as soon as we stop paying for it, we gotta replace the bloody thing. And that's, you know, if you buy it for cash up front, then you got all those useful years, and if you put it into reserve, you might stretch it out for 10, but that entire time you're not paying any interest at all. Refinancing bonds, when possible, when they're eligible. I think we've got one more round of this. The treasurer saved you $79,000 this year in debt service payments by simply taking higher interest rate lending and refinancing it at lower interest rates. OPEB, other post-employment benefits. This is a sobering fact of all government. I told you before that health insurance is about $2 million this year, about $2.3 million in the budget next year. I'm curious, anybody who's not involved in government, how much of that $2.3 million do you think is being generated by benefits being paid for retirees?
I'm gonna guess 30%.
That's a pretty good guess. 33%, $800,000. So the town pays. It's called pay as you go. We have this obligation, we know it's going to last 20 years. But we didn't save for it. We're just going to pay as we go every single year. We just pay the bill. It's $800,000 a year, just a little bit under $800,000. I think it's $779,000, something like that. Now, no offense to those people. They served, they bargained for that in their contract, and they got it. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is to say we spend $800,000 a year to benefit people who no longer benefit the community. It's another way of looking at it. In many communities across the country, they're beginning to save, and even some communities in Rhode Island, put the money into an OPEB trust. The OPEB trust pays the bills, but it has balance left at the end of the year, and that money is reinvested, and the market starts to put money back into your OPEB trust fund, so that's not coming out of the taxpayer's pocket. The interlocal trust formed a very beneficial OPEB trust cooperative. The town has joined it. So the formal mechanism is there. Here's the good news. I mean, every little bit that you do is saving you money in the future. You have two collective bargaining units, the firefighters and the police. Both already pay something into their OPEB account. The OPEB account is set up in a way where you take the $800,000 at the beginning of the year, put it all in, and then it gets paid out of the OPEB account during the year. So you might only get, 10, 15 basis points, but you're going to get something for that money sitting in that balance all year. But the more money you put into that, you will do the exact same thing there that you've done with the police pension fund, where this community and its taxpayers stepped up to the plate, contributed more than you were required to do, and now your police pension fund is very nearly, it's out of critical status and it's approaching funded status. Because the town bit the bullet and did frankly, the right thing for future generations. Every extra dollar that gets put in right now is saving $1.50, $1.60, $2 down the line because you don't have to pay it in at some future date. You're getting all the interest. So right now you're pretty much doubling it. So we're paying out about $350,000 a year in benefits, but more than $700,000 is going into it every year. OPEB needs to be funded the same way, because if you think about the problems you have today, the goal should be, can we take that $800,000 out of the operating budget? Can we find a way to just not have to fund that $800,000 every single year? And lastly, one-time windfalls. Budget financial professionals all over the world hate it when communities use one-time budget windfalls to fix long-term solutions in just 1 year. I didn't say that exactly right. I have a bill I'm going to get every year. It's a big one. I haven't done what I need to do. I've neither generated the savings nor collected enough revenue to actually manage that bill every year. but then I go and I sell a piece of property. So for that year, I pay the bill with that. The next year, guess what? The bill comes due, but there's no property left. Everybody's recognized that that's a sign of significant financial weakness when a community begins to do that. But it's a source of strength when, if you have a one-time capital windfall and you put it into something that is a long-term bill, you're paying your debt ahead. It's the same like putting extra money on your mortgage every month. Where are the non-tax revenue opportunities that could increase? We do have some one-time property sales that we could recognize in the near future. We still want to pursue a land of low value sale. This takes a significant amount of doing. Tony Lynn and I have talked about it. We've talked about it with contractors. The town owns all of these little freckle-sized pieces of property around town. They're orphans of road projects and subdivisions and things, and it all has accrued to the town. And no tax money is generated from it because they're not on the roll. And so you add up all those little freckles, and pretty soon you've got quite a bit of property that you're not taxing. We've got to resolve that situation, allow the abutters to absorb that land so it becomes part of their real estate that they pay taxes on. And then lastly, there's the entire approach to the industrial part. Solar energy in any energy project proposed does have one singular benefit above all others. If they pay what's called payment in lieu of taxes, pilot, it's not part of the levy. It offsets the levy. So right now, Amera Energy pays the town over $750,000 a year, and it's not part of the tax base. And it goes up 3% every year. It goes up by the CPI. So that money's constantly knocking down what the taxpayer is going to be expected to pay. The more assets we put on that side of the ledger, the more revenue we generate from that type of arrangement, the less the taxpayer is asked to pay in real estate property taxes. I did a lot of talking. I hope it's clear. We work very hard to have a plan and to execute against the plan, working at all times with the authorization, permission, and direction of the town council to do these things for you. We identify them. Sometimes they're not good ideas, but we bring them up to the decision-making body and ask for permission, and we're getting all these things moving forward. So the conclusions: municipal tax levy has increased steadily, but at a rate equal to that of the value of the town. Debt service has driven a significant part of the municipal budget growth. Municipal capital is key. Current service levels compare favorably versus expectations, and there is a plan in place to try to bring us to the point of stability and predictability. If you ask my professional opinion, it takes 4-5 years of careful, thoughtful, diligent management to take all of this volatility in the budget and squeeze it down so that people have a predictable pattern that they can follow. And the more predictable you are, and the more careful you are not to pay interest, you see that stable level, the actual costs should start to come down. That's all I have to say for this evening. I thought that it would give you some context for what's going on in the community. I wasn't going to open up to questions because I don't want to get dragged into anything that I have promised not to talk about. But I did put a lot of information up there, and if there's a specific question about something I did talk about, I'm willing to answer.
I've got a quick question.
Scott.
Great presentation. And ironically, the town as a public entity and a private entity are really about the same. Everything you're talking about. And you started hinting to something that I think is terribly important for a lot of us, perhaps. We're coming into this and we're looking at a year, a budget. And that's a disservice. I really think that the town needs to reach beyond an election cycle and look 10 years out and explain to the residents in Tiverton what those projections look like. And to your point, which was well laid out, once we're armed with that information, I think we're in a better position to make the hard choices. Whether we want to pay more taxes now or less taxes, I think that we need that information well beyond this year or next year's tax cycle or budget cycle into the future. It's gonna require some money, but I don't see how a town can operate in such a short period of time without seeing the long term. In the private sector, as you probably know, and some of us know, you have to look out that far and get some projections, at least some ideas of where we're gonna be. And while it's expensive, I think the town needs to operate under those guidelines.
Anyone else? Sir, in the back.
My question's kind of related. I was just wondering, you mentioned our debt service and it's rising. Is a lot of that in certain bonds that are going to be ending in the near future, the next few years? I don't know what our schedule is related to that.
Your oldest bond, the one that's going to close out the soonest, is the TIF bond on the municipal interceptor. I want to say 2027. Am I right? 22? 8 more years.
In the schools, we get about another 25 years for those 30-year bonds?
20. 20 more years almost. 20 or 21. I mean, they all came kind of in seriatim in 3 years in a row, so they're all going to be about the same age. 19, 20, 21. The library you just took up. Man, you had your hand up.
Just my concern is that up till now, like the past 20 years, maybe before some of us even came here, the maintenance wasn't planned. None of the planning that you're talking about has been done. So now we all have to pay for all the past mistakes, which is a problem. You know, it's a big problem. We're having to bite the bullet for past non-planning, like my Midwestern high school is in perfect condition, even though they have a lesser budget, that type of thing. It's just not been done, and I'm concerned about it, and don't want to take on any more bonds until we can get the plan in place like he's talking about, and really know what we need. I just can't see that we can spend any more. Plus, we have 10 million more. It would have been 10 million less if we'd gone up 2% every year. And what would we have done then? I mean, we've given, the town's given the budget so much more money, but I don't see any increase in any of the services at the moment. I know you want to plan it, but I don't see it at the moment, and it's worrisome. That's all I'm just going to say, it's worrisome.
I think I want to address one of the things that you said.
Over 10% for
Yeah.
many years, yeah.
I want to make a point about the phenomenon you mentioned, which is you take stock of all the things that need to be done, and that may not have been done for a long time, and it can be pretty overwhelming. I might have a t-shirt made for it so I can hand them out. Because there are certain days when I'm always a little bit worried when Manny and Phil come in my office and they have big grins on their face. I say, jeez, what'd you find now? Come on, you're gonna see this. And, whoops, that's the wire from the microphone. Mike, you still got me?
Yeah.
And I go down to a recreation facility, and you know everything's upside down. All the studs are upside down. Everything's notched in the wrong way. And I said, I can't believe this thing is still standing. And it's the God's honest truth. And the only way through that is that asset management plan I was talking about. Pick off the low-hanging fruit, and frankly, at some point, you also have to triage. You have to say, you know what? And I've made this conclusion about the bathrooms at Town Farm. I'm just not going to put another dollar into them because it's just really bad use of the taxpayers' funds. The roof is all wrong, the plumbing's all wrong, the well needs to be redug. We're just going to we'll take care of it so it doesn't become a blighted eyesore to some extent, but we're not going to fix the place up. We're not going to spend, in my first year here, we probably spent 10, 12, 15 hours a week with employees just trying to take care of it. It's a total waste of time and effort.
Well, the thing is too, it's on the municipal side, as far as our capital and keeping the upkeep and maintaining it and improving it, we've kicked the can down the road for 30 years in this town. And we're going to have to sooner or later bite the bullet and either, triage them, these facilities, and fix them so they're suitable facilities for the taxpayer. And we're going to have to stop putting money away for the future when we know roofs don't last forever. Buildings don't last forever. If we're not gonna, take the big hits, we've got to stop putting money aside in a capital account for future repairs. And not next year, I'm talking 25 years from now. Because a roof on the school 25 years from now is gonna be 10 times what it is today.
And I give an insight into a phone call I made this winter. I drove by and I saw something, so I called the director and I said, could you please tell me, go outside and add up the value of all the equipment you have parked outside in the winter? $600,000 worth of stuff outside because there was no room inside. And it's just, it can be a little frustrating fighting the battle to try to legitimize the case for building more space. But that is the case right there. The space might only cost a fraction of that $600,000. You're going to make that $600,000 worth of equipment last a whole heck of a lot longer if you just take care of it. Mike?
So we're part of the Angell Trust because of our membership in the League of Cities and Towns?
I don't think it works that way.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah, separate entities, you join. There are communities that are one and not the
Yeah,
other.
it's a different name now. It's a governmental health trust in overall when we started it. We're one of the founding members in Tiverton
Yeah.
of the whole state.
Everybody was together, then they got divorced, then they remarried. Yeah, it's ugly.
And
But what have we saved over time? What have we saved over time?
With the trust?
Yeah.
Let me tell you how the trust works. It's recognized in the insurance world that the bigger the pool, the better. And a match like to like. So municipalities are like to like. We got police officers, we have firefighters, we have guys who work outside. So let's put them all together in one pool and manage the risk. And then each year, the pool is self-insured, but everybody's contributing. Some communities will have a year where they have very little in the way of claims activity, and other communities will have a ton of claims activity. And they subsidize one another. They smooth out that curve over a period of time. Fascinating thing, if you look at Tiverton's actuals, the actual spent on health insurance, it reflects, not this year, not last year, but the 2 years before that, the town had almost no claim activity. And so your rates, and it's amazing in the world that we live in today that the town's health insurance rates for 2 years in a row, not only did it not go up, 1 year it actually went down. Then we got whacked. We had claims experience 2 years ago that was 24% higher than our premium. At the end of the year, we got a 14.3% increase. So you asked me how the trust works and how it saves us grief. It's because all those other communities that had a good year, they subsidized Tiverton. They smoothed out Tiverton's experience. And then there's this other tool. Everybody puts their premium in, and that forms equity. It's the way mutual insurance works. There's a node of equity, and the equity earns money, and that money is distributed back to the members of the trust. The town, for many years, bankrolled its distribution. And so we got to the end of last year, and I want to say we had $160,000, $170,000 in our premium stabilization account, and we used a good chunk of that to prevent that hit from just whacking you as taxpayers. And we have more this year to take to try to smooth out this year's 7.43 on top of the 14. If you go it alone, you don't get the benefit of being part of the trust. Nancy.
Matt, thank you for your presentation. I think I agree with the first speaker, I don't know his name, but.
Scott.
Scott. I think the frustration, I have a couple of viewpoints. One is, you said you've been here 2 years, so you got dropped into what was in Tiverton and what you had to deal with. But what was in Tiverton has been the result of decisions made by our governing body. Town council really is the one who's in charge of making a lot of decisions of where our money is spent. And I think the town would like the comfort to know that there is some kind of long-range planning responsible going on so that we're not just doing this cycle after cycle. But the other point I want to make is that our property values have gone up like 0.4%. And so I don't know where you're saying that everything's in par. I mean, we're asking, you know, we're losing value in the town, and yet people are being asked to pay more, and it's just wrong. And I think, you know, I know Denise did a wonderful thing in refinancing stuff, and she's been looking for different options, and we thank her for that. I think when you think about just what goes on in your own household, if the income drops or your taxes go up, you know what? You have to look at what is, and maybe you can't have what you had before because you just can't afford it. Or if affording different services means you can't fix roofs on buildings, you know, there's got to be some sanity in the decision making. So that's all I want to say. I mean, I understand this is where we are,
Yeah.
but this is not where we should be. And
I only want to engage you on one point. I have only been here 2 years, and I can say something as an outsider that I think sometimes needs to be said. Whatever happened in the past, I can't comment on. I wasn't here paying attention. I do see a track record of there's just a lot of mistrust. And that's why I started off my presentation saying, if it's wrong to think the government's on one side and you're on the other end. But let me just tell you something. In the couple of years I've been here, go through some of the initiatives your town council led. We bought a fuel management system, you know, with a urging of some of our department heads. The town council signed off on it. It was actually right before I started, so it was when Nancy was interim. So you went from this fuel slip thing, pieces of paper on some guy's truck floor, to an actual computerized system. So you actually know who's fueling up when. Good management, right? All of those, and that's just one example. We had members of the council participating in contract negotiations that generated huge savings to the town. Directly, personally involved, caring about the outcome, and expressing their interest and actually learning from the process so they go back to their colleagues. So for the time I've served 2 different councils in my time here, and I can say we have been paying so much attention to every single last detail. We now have a personnel handbook. We're working on discipline. I can't do any of this without the support of your elected officials.
But I think what you're also, the reason you are doing this, I think you would be foolish to overlook the fact that for the past 3 years, the taxpayers in town have said, no, you know, and I don't want to get into budgets, but there's been a message from the people in Tiverton that we can't afford this. And I think the town council maybe is hearing
If you're going to politicize
No, I'm
this,
not
because you are.
No, wait, hold on, let's stop. Wait a minute.
I don't think
No.
this is what it is.
This was
I'm not going to start.
This was good, but I'm just going to make one thing very clear. I paid for the room. I paid for the camera.
And I
It's
was
my
gonna say
meeting.
that.
It's my meeting, and you know I'm not going to stop people from expressing their opinion. You notice I'm not engaging. I'm only engaging where I think I need to. But if
Let's stop.
yeah.
We need to stop the meeting.
All right.
Why do we need
But wait a minute, the chief. I'm going to give my chief.
That's how you get around having a meeting where the people ask questions and all of a sudden everything's out there. It's just before people cast ballot. This should not have been taking place.
Question, please. Thank you. Excuse me. I have a question. It's not political. It's an observation. I've been your chief for 13 years. I've never come over budget, ever. Not even close. And I'm proud of that. Because I'm a cheap son of a bitch. Ask my men. But I want to tell you something you do. You're missing something hugely important here. We lose people, a resource, every year to other communities for money. Okay? It costs $2,500 to just equip them to go to academy. We pick up the best people and we lose them time and time again. Please invest in your employees as well as your damn buildings. Because you're losing firemen, you're losing police officers every year. You do this for teachers. I don't see a lot, Mrs. Black, a lot of teachers leaving. I don't know. But I can tell you my police officers are leaving I just lost a great candidate to Westerly. She's starting $8,000 more than they get here, just to walk in the door. My lieutenants are getting patrolman's pay in Barrington. You can shrug it off, you can do what you want to do, but it costs a great deal of money to lose these people, to say nothing more of institutional knowledge that's walking out the door. Please pay attention to the fact that you're losing good people. As well as buildings deteriorating, this is the big picture of your town. We serve you. We do serve you, and they serve you well, and I'm proud to be part of that.
Well, we'd like to give you money, but it's the past problems we're making up for now. We have
All
to
right, so
pay
I'm
for it.
gonna, yeah, now's a good time.
We love
Because
you.
we are losing a lot of people.
Yeah.
Trust me, the fire chief as well.
We love you guys, but.
All right, folks, I just want to say this. Thank you for coming and listening. My mission was to try to put everybody in a common understanding of the basic underlying facts. Now the conversation does occur amongst all of you, but you can do so amongst yourselves and leave me out of it. When you make your decision, I'll be happy to implement it. Thank you, guys.